Hello, viewers. So I'm going to break away a little bit from my usual approach of, reviewing media, but no worries, I still very much believe in being silly, engaging, and thoughtful. It's just, I want this to become a WandaVision viewing series, one that does not include spoilers, but instead will introduce sort of concepts that we can think about together and sort of work through as we're walking through the WandaVision series. Now, the purpose of this particular pre-watch video is to introduce 3 important concepts that I think we'll want to hold in the back of our minds as we're watching the WandaVision series. Now, the first concept that I want to discuss here is the importance of narrative cohesiveness to mental health. We usually tend to think of storytelling as being something having more to do with entertainment. However, I think you can make an incredibly strong case that storytelling is much more important as a means of mental health, healing and sort of mental health balance than it ever was meant to be as just pure entertainment. A coherent narrative gives us access to closure, right? We have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It allows us to feel more at peace with whatever event we're trying to either reflect upon or work our way through. It's why oftentimes today psychiatrists are utilizing what's called narrative therapy, where you recreate and find a way from the beginnings of an event, a traumatic event even, all the way through to an end point. That process of creating a coherent narrative is in many times enough to help someone maybe never get over something traumatic, but to move through it. Journals, diaries, vlogs, all that stuff. Anytime that we try to tell a story, we're trying to impose order on something that is perhaps chaotic in our minds. So what's interesting to me with WandaVision is, as chaotic as the trailer is, right? And again, I'm not going to spoil anything, but as chaotic as the trailer looks, it'll be interesting to me to see who is trying to create or impose coherence on this narrative. Is it Wanda or Vision or something outside of that? The second concept that I want to introduce here actually connects with the first one. So as important as it is for us to have coherent narratives, what are the things that often get in the way of that? Well, we have a term for that. Those are narrative breaches. And depending on how big or how strong a narrative breach is, you could actually disrupt or fracture a narrative so much that you can never really find your way back. Narrative breaches essentially work 2 ways, and here's what I mean by that. You have a storyline going on in, let's say, a TV show, right? But while the TV show is trying to create a coherent narrative, the audience, us, we're trying to create a coherent narrative that parallels that to a degree. So what ends up happening is this. Let's say you're watching a show and a character that you're really invested in is killed off really suddenly. I mean, you didn't see it coming at all. The narrative breach does not simply happen in the story. The narrative breach happens within us as well, because now we have to try to find our way back to that storyline that we were creating. And that's not always an easy thing to do and can even cause a slight bit or varying levels of trauma. I remember a lot of people talking about feeling an actual sense of trauma with the death of a certain character in The Walking Dead. And many sort of articles and people were talking about it all over the place, how they just thought, oh, that's the end of the story for me. I'm done. I'm done with this, right? That's because the story introduced such a strong narrative breach that for many people, they couldn't find their way back to the main plot. And so you always have to be careful about that when you're writing these kinds of stories. For WandaVision, there are quite a few narrative breaches in the first 2 episodes. And what I think we should do is we should always try to keep in mind, if you've already seen the episodes or you're going to see the episodes after this, try to look for where these narrative breaches are and how much they sort of disrupt the main narrative that either Wanda and Vision are trying to create, and the narrative that we're trying to create along with her. Now, the final concept that I want to introduce here was introduced to us through the trailer itself, and that is this connection that WandaVision has with media, more particularly media from the past. I don't think necessarily that media dictates how we live our lives, but media does a wonderful job of reflecting what we think can be, and in some cases should be. And that's a strong enough force that it can sometimes lead to us restructuring how we see reality in front of us and how we even start to build reality around us. We have access today to so much content, so much media. It used to be that if you watched a TV show and sat down to watch it, and I'm old enough to remember this, what you would do is you would essentially say, I'm going to disconnect from reality and connect with the reality of whatever show you're watching. And then when it's done, you disconnect from that media reality back to your actual reality. However, what I find interesting is from the trailer alone, it seems like reality and media are moving fluidly, almost like vision moves through objects. And I'm not sure if WandaVision is trying to say this or not, but I do think it's bringing up an interesting question about the evolution of media today. Again, with access to so much content that we have, are we still able to disconnect from reality, connect to the media's reality, and then disconnect from that and go back to our real reality? Or has media and life essentially fused into one so that we just move within both constantly? And the final question I would ask you with that is, in watching WandaVision and seeing how that works, is it sort of making a point about whether or not it's good for us to move in and out so fluidly? Or should we sort of try to move our way back to disconnecting from reality, our reality, connecting to the media reality, and then disconnecting from that when it's done and coming back to the real world per se? I don't know. But I'm interested in seeing how these three concepts sort of play out in our watch of WandaVision. And if you're interested in going through this, sort of quest with me, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. And if you feel like watching something that's silly, engaging, and thoughtful, go ahead and check out one of my other review videos. I come out with those every week as well.